Riley Morgan's car wheels crunched gravel as she rolled into Black Hollow, just as the sky betrayed a heavy, bruised hue. The decaying storefronts, their paint peeling like dead skin, whispered of better days long gone. She pulled her coat tighter against the chill that crawled beneath her collar. And for a moment, the wind felt less like air and more like a sentient exhale. In her chest, regret throbbed. Every failed apology and unspoken word with her brother Owen weighed like boulders on her ribs. She reminded herself that the cyclone of emotions she carried was necessary fuel, propelling her forward. Tonight, the unbalanced light of a waning moon revealed more than the town's decrepitude. It flickered on something deeper, something hungry. The phone booth outside the police station stood as a relic of isolation, its glass smeared and cracked, refusing to reflect Riley's determined gaze. She dialed the station's number, each press of the keypad echoing like hollow knocks on a coffin lid. Her voice remained steady, even as the officer on duty sighed dismissively through the receiver. "Nothing but old brunch jokes from the locals," he said, scoffing at her plea to investigate Owen's disappearance. To them, he was just another fugitive, escaping to the woods or succumbing to an overdose. But Riley felt the air thicken with another truth, one that pulsed beneath the town's brittle surface. As she hung up, the booth's neon sign sputtered, as though warning her to step away. Black Hollow's autumn was merciless, an unrelenting percussion of wind and rain. Leaves tumbled like dying thoughts across the abandoned square, and the windows of the mine office, long since shattered, caught the streetlights in fractured prisms. Riley's boots stopped at the foot of the chained and locked mine entrance, where rust ate at the metal links like corrosion on hope. A single shovel leaned against the fence, a relic from someone who'd once refused to give up. She reached out to brush her fingertips over it, feeling a tremor of both comfort and dread. Whoever left it here had a stake in these tunnels, and Riley suspected they weren't alone in their curiosity. Memories of her brother's laugh surfaced unbidden, a sound so bright it once banished every shadow. Yet those echoes felt hollow now, distorted by distance and fear. Riley dug through her coat pocket and found her phone, replaying the last voicemail Owen left. "Don't go near the mine. It's awake." His voice wavered between hysteria and something deeper, an otherworldly cadence that clung to her mind. The recording repeated on loop as she traced the outline of the mine's entrance, its abrupt stillness daring her to step closer. Her finger trembled over the play button, as if poised on the edge of revelation and ruin. The town's once celebrated mine had claimed dozens of lives decades ago, when greed gouged too deep and the earth retaliated. In dusty archives and yellowing newspapers, the stories were buried beneath layers of corporate obfuscation. Riley's hand brushed over a torn flyer on the ground. "Mine reopening celebration." A cruel joke, considering the mine's silent, yawning mouth. She pressed the paper into her notebook, the ink bleeding through with an ominous finality. This teaser of attempted revival spoke of denial, a town refusing to acknowledge its own scars, much like a person refusing to confront their pain until it becomes monstrous. She turned from the mine to find Elijah waiting in the damp glow of a single street lamp. His beard had grown wild since she last saw him, and his eyes, once bright with hope, were now shadowed by guilt and loss. He'd lost his father in the collapse, and every whispered rumor about Owen's vanishing tormented him. Riley offered a half smile, but it faltered when she saw how the wind tugged at Elijah's shoulders. "You shouldn't have come alone," he murmured, tension vibrating his words. They shared a knowing silence, two survivors bound by grief and the peculiar comfort of mutual fear. As day dipped into night, Riley and Elijah met Marina at the town's archive, a cramped room smelling of dust and regret. Marina, with a halo of copper curls and inquisitive gaze, unfolded old maps and journals, each entry a breadcrumb leading them closer to the mine's darkest secrets. Her passion for antiquity revealed details no local cared to remember. Strange symbols carved into support beams, miners vanishing without warning, and a forgotten language scrawled on a wall in the deepest shaft. Riley's skeptical mind wrestled with each revelation, but Marina's conviction was magnetic. In the wavering lamplight, the map's margins seemed to move, as if alive with the pulse of an angry earth. That evening, the trio stood before the mine's sealed doorway, flashlights in hand, hearts clamoring like impaled birds inside their chests. Riley shone her light across the rusted chain, tracing the pattern of corrosion that told stories of decades spent in silence. This was welded shut after the collapse, she noted, voice low. Elijah's knuckles whitened as he gripped a crowbar. Marina knelt to examine the lock, eyes alight with fascination. None spoke of fear, but it thrummed through the team, like static electricity before a storm. The lock yielded under Elijah's determination, and with a roar of metal fracturing, the way into the depths beckoned. The moment the heavy door creaked open, a gust of stale air washed over them, thick with the scent of rot and something indefinably ancient. Their lights flickered against walls, slick with moisture, and the whispers began. Riley paused, heart clenching at the faint murmur of voices just beyond comprehension. Riley. Riley. The name slithered through the darkness, half comfort, half threat. She told herself it was the wind, or her imagination, but the sound pressed against her eardrums. With each tentative step, the tunnel contracted, the walls closing in, as though the mine itself was breathing, an immense, living tomb, exhaling centuries of sorrow. Ellie's gasp broke the tension, as the beam of his flashlight landed on fresh scratches gouged into the stone floor marks no wind could carve. The evidence of another presence, silent and patient, followed them deeper. Each scratch was jagged, erratic, a frantic signature pleading for escape or warning them to turn back. Riley swallowed hard, the stench intensifying, as though the mine was hungry to share its secrets. Marina recorded every detail, her fingers tracing the scars. They weren't here when I surveyed this, she whispered. They exchanged a glance that acknowledged the truth. They were no longer observers, but intruders. The corridor split, offering two paths, one leading toward a shaft that plummeted into shadow, the other veering toward a chamber with half-buried beams and collapsed debris. Riley hesitated, weighing instinct against logic. Owen's last frantic voicemail mentioned a hidden chamber. This must be it. She pointed down the left corridor, her voice firm despite her racing pulse. This way. Every step felt like a descent into another realm, the air growing colder, the whispers sharpening their syllables. With each step, the mind demanded her resolve, testing the iron in her bones. Down the narrow corridor, they found an archway sealed with stone slabs engraved in runes no scholar had translated in decades. Marina knelt to photograph the inscriptions, her breath catching at each symbol that whispered of binding and imprisonment. She traced the lines with a gloved finger, muttering theories about echoes of ancient rites. Riley's hand hovered over the stone, sensing a vibration beneath her palm. A heartbeat from beyond. She forced herself to step back. A distant drip echoed through the corridor, a metronome keeping time with her pounding heart. There was no turning away now. With tools clasped in trembling hands, they chipped at the runes until one of the slabs shifted, just enough to reveal a narrow crack. A pulse of cold air rushed out, carrying whispers that tangled in their throats. "He's here," Riley whispered, voice cracking. Elijah's jaw clenched. Marina's eyes widened with a mix of excitement and fear. The crack widened, and their flashlights penetrated the opening, illuminating what lay beyond. A chamber carved directly into the living rock, walls smooth as skin, and in its center stood a granite sarcophagus etched with the same forbidden runes. The sarcophagus exuded an aura of silence so absolute it roared in their ears. As they entered, the atmosphere unraveled. Their lights flickered, and the air thickened with the weight of something old, something that tasted of regret and fear. Riley's chest tightened as she approached the sarcophagus. The inscription seemed to writhe under her gaze, promising release or damnation, she couldn't tell which. Elijah laid a hand on her shoulder, his voice unsteady. "Riley, maybe we should leave this alone." But Riley could not walk away. Not with Owen's voice echoing in her head. She pressed her ear to the stone, straining to hear anything. His heartbeat, his panic, anything. Instead, the sarcophagus sighed. A low, resonant hum rose from the depths of the stone, vibrating in their bones. Marina stumbled back, her notebook clattering to the floor. Riley's fingers found a lever hidden beneath the carvings. With a deep breath, she pulled. The sarcophagus lid ground open, revealing only darkness within, as though it devoured light. At that moment, a voice resonated from the void. A voice that was Owen's, but torn and twisted. "Riley, you shouldn't have come." The sound was both pleading and mocking, threatening and familiar, and it cracked Riley's composure, flooding her mind with memories she had tried to bury. Without warning, the chamber shivered. Pebbles rained from the ceiling, and a current of frigid air surged out, carrying countless whispers. Riley staggered, the voices lashing her ears with fragments of her past regrets, moments she wished she could erase. Elijah shouted her name, but the world narrowed to Owen's voice, twisting her guilt into a vice. Marina screamed, her voice swallowed by the roar of unseen wings beating in the darkness. Riley forced herself to stand tall, gripping the lever like a lifeline. The sarcophagus trembled, and the lid clanged shut of its own accord, plunging them into silence that felt heavier than any scream. When the dust settled, Marina lay on the cold floor, eyes unfocused and mind broken by whatever truth had greeted her. Elijah knelt beside her, shaking her gently as if she were a child lost in a nightmare. Riley's heart sank as she knelt to her friend's side, the weight of what she had unleashed clawing at her sanity. Marina's breath came shallow and tremulous. Her lips formed words that no one else could hear. Riley closed her eyes, steeling herself. Guilt and responsibility warred inside her. She had dared to open a door that perhaps should have stayed sealed forever. They decided to retreat, each step away from the chamber feeling like an escape from quicksand. Yet the mind fought them, twisting pathways into a labyrinth. The whispers followed, calling their names, conjuring illusions of the ones they loved lost in pain. Riley swung her light frantically, every shadow a potential threat. Elijah's flashlight illuminated fresh scratches on the walls, deeper and more frenetic than before, as if the entity was drawing them closer. Marina clutched Riley's arm, silent tears tracing paths down her cheeks. The trio moved in agonizing slow motion, as though the mine itself wanted them to stay trapped in its depths. At a fork in the tunnel, Riley halted, her instincts screaming that this was not their path home. She knelt to examine the stone underfoot. There, half buried in silt, was a tattered piece of Owen's jacket, familiar stitching dulled by time and moisture. Her breath hitched. "He was here," she whispered, voice hollow. Elijah knelt beside her, guilt pooling in his eyes. "We have to find him," he said, desperation cracking his tone. Marina, torn between her fascination and horror, nodded with an almost feral intensity. Together, they pressed onward, drawn by the faint echo of a scream that might have been real, or another trick of the entity. Turning a corner, they found themselves in a grand cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness and walls glistening with mineral veins. In the center lay the skeletal remains of tram tracks, curving into a gaping well. The atmosphere thrummed with a magnetic pull that beckoned them toward the edge. Riley peered down into the abyss, her light revealing nothing but swirling blackness. From the depths, a faint tapping rose, rhythmic and deliberate like fingernails drumming on bone. Each tap resonated through her chest, and she knew it was Owen's plea, or perhaps the entity mocking his voice. Her thrill of hope collided with a surge of terror. Elijah found a rusted elevator car half embedded in rubble, its cables frayed and useless. With trembling hands, he gestured upward, pointing to a narrow ledge carved into the wall, offering a precarious descent. Riley shook her head, scanning the cavern's walls for another route. Marina, breathing raggedly, spotted a series of ladders bolted into the stone, descending into the abyss. Each rung looked slick, unsteady underfoot. Riley swallowed, thinking of Owen's final voicemail. This was the path she had to take, not just to save him, but to end this nightmare for everyone. With a nod, she led the way down, the ladders groaning under their weight. As they climbed deeper, the soundscape shifted. The dripping water gave way to a low rumble, as though the earth itself was shifting in anticipation. Lightning-like veins of phosphorescence traced patterns on the walls, illuminating symbols identical to those on the sarcophagus. Riley's mind reeled. These symbols weren't just warnings. They were chains, meant to keep something imprisoned. Marina snapped photos, her excitement tinged with fear. Elijah's grip on the ladder tightened until his knuckles turned white. Each rung brought them closer to the source of that relentless tapping. And with each step, Riley wondered if they were rushing towards salvation or their doom. The stairs ended at a narrow platform that overlooked a circular chamber. In the center, bathed in otherworldly light, was a stone platform surrounded by the same runes. The platform was like an altar. Riley's heart raced. She whispered his name, and for a moment, the figure moved, raising a pale hand. Then the light dimmed, and the shadow shifted, revealing eyes too deep, too old to be human. The hollow one stood, his form closely resembling Owen's silhouette, but his head was bowed low, as if he were wearing a shroud of sorrow. Riley stepped forward, adrenaline sparking her muscles to life. "Owen!" she called again, voice cracking with hope and fear. The entity lifted its head slowly, its face folding into the exact contours of her brother's. But its eyes told another story, voids reflecting her regrets. "You left me," it whispered in Owen's voice, each syllable dripping with betrayal. The sound shredded Riley's defenses, dredging every memory of their final fight, the harsh words, her slammed door, the regret that followed. She took a shaky breath, remembering Marina's theory. The Hollow One fed on regret, and now it wore her brother to consume her soul. Marina and Elijah flanked Riley, holding torches that cast long, quivering shadows. Riley squared her shoulders, refusing to collapse beneath the weight of her sorrow. "You're not him," she declared, voice resonant. The entity tilted its head, tilting Riley's reality. It stretched out a hand, and the chamber lights flickered as if uncertain. "He's here," it said, nodding toward the darkness. Without warning, the runes on the dais ignited in blue fire, sending sparks dancing across the ceiling. The energy pulsed, and the entity let out a chorus of voices, Owen's among them, each one vying for dominance. Riley clamped her hands over her ears, scrambling to find her resolve. Summoning every ounce of strength, Riley fixed her gaze on the entity's hollow eyes. She remembered her training, the focus that steadied her hand during combat exercises. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a flare gun, her last resort. Marina's eyes widened. Elijah opened his mouth to protest, but Riley cut him off with a look. This was the choice she had to make. She leveled the gun with unsteady hands, taking aim at the dais, the heart of the entity's prison. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice barely audible over the chamber's thunderous pulse. The shot rang out, echoing like a gunshot in a canyon. The flare arced through the air and struck the dais' edge, igniting a trail of gas vents hidden beneath the stone floor. A hiss answered the shot, growing louder in seconds as the vents roared to life. The entity screeched, a sound composed of 1,000 agonized echoes, and lunged toward Riley with impossible speed. She tumbled backward, her torch clattering to the ground, but her expression held grim satisfaction as the chamber began to quake. The gas fire snaked across the runes, illuminating every carved symbol in a hellish glow. The cavern shuddered violently, ancient supports groaning under the strain of explosive force. Magnetized fragments of stone and dust whirled in a vortex, obscuring Riley's vision. She shielded her face with her arm, tears streaming from the heat and dust. From the maelstrom, the entity's anguished wail resounded, its shape dissolving into writhing shadows. Riley felt a pull beneath her feet as the tunnel began to collapse, intended to seal the ancient force forever. Rallying her focus, she grabbed Marina's and Elijah's hands, pulling them toward the ladder they had climbed down. The ascent was a blur of crashing rock and thunderous rumbles. Each rung was slick with dust and sweat as Riley hauled Marina upward while Elijah followed, covering their retreat. The chamber below gave one final ear-splitting roar as the explosion sealed the abyss with fracturing stone. The ladder shook, and a chunk of ceiling crashed down, sending dust so thick it chased them upward like a living tide. Riley kicked at the ladder's last rung, hauling herself onto the platform just as a massive beam split in two, sealing the path behind them with a thunderous finality. They collapsed at the base of the ladder in the secondary corridor, chests heaving and lungs burning. No voices whispered now, only the slow echo of dust settling. Riley closed her eyes, listening for Owen's voice among the silence and finding only the beating of her own heart. Marina sat dazed, her camera dangling uselessly around her neck. Elisha checked his phone. No signal, and looked at Riley with a mixture of relief and sorrow. They exchanged no words. None were needed. They had faced the depth of their darkest regrets and emerged into a world that would no longer haunt them. As they navigated the final stretch towards the entrance, the mine's passageways seemed quieter, as if recovering from the violence unleashed within. Flickers of phosphorescence winked out, and water dripped steadily, restoring the mine's natural cadence. Riley paused beneath the chain-locked entrance, looking at the carved symbols she had passed. They had done what generations of miners could not: silence the entity at its source. The sky outside was fading to dawn's pale indigo, and a lone bird cried overhead, a hopeful herald in contrast to the mine's malevolent stillness. Once beyond the mine's threshold, they inhaled the crisp autumn air with gratitude that bordered on wonder. Black Hollow lay in morning hush, its wombs hidden beneath swirling fog. Riley closed her eyes, letting the wind erase the dust from her hair. She reached into her coat and pulled out her phone, replaying Owen's voicemail one last time. This time, his warning felt like a bridge to the past rather than a shackle to guilt. The memory of his voice was no longer a weapon used against her, but a reminder of love lost and found. Elijah broke the silence first, voice hoarse but firm. "We should tell someone." Riley nodded, knowing they had to bring the truth into daylight, rid the town of its unspoken curse. Marina, face pale but resolute, added, "History needs to know what happened here. No more secrets." Riley agreed, determination settling in her bones. They picked their way down the slipshod path to the abandoned town center, ready to collect proof, testimonies, and evidence of the mine's hidden truths. Black Hollow might never be the same, but it could finally move beyond its nightmares. Days later, Riley sat in a makeshift office at the newly reopened town hall, filing reports with trembling fingers. Newspapers arrived bearing headlines about the mine's mysterious collapse and the disappearance of 3 explorers. She watched as journalists' eyes widened at her photographs of the ruins and the sealed chamber. Marina stood beside her, passionately explaining the symbol's significance, while Elijah collected audio recordings of the voices they had captured. Through these jars of sound and shards of stone, they wove a narrative of horror and hope. As word spread, the townspeople emerged from their homes, faces lined with skepticism and curiosity. Some clutched rosaries, others torches of anger, demanding closure. A council meeting was called beneath the dim glow of chandeliers in the hall's vaulted chamber. Riley stood at the front, scanning the crowd's expectant faces. She took a deep breath, recalling the mine's stifling darkness, Owen's pleading voice, and the sacrifice that had sealed the ancient evil. Her voice rang clear. What was buried beneath us was a force born of fear, greed, and regret. It will no longer define our future. In the weeks that followed, historians and parapsychologists descended on Black Hollow, eager to study the sealed mine and its forbidden language. Schools arranged trips to the newly secured entrance for educational purposes, teaching lessons of caution and memory. Riley monitored their progress, heart both proud and protective. She visited Owen's favorite childhood tree in the town square, its twisted roots a testament to survival amid adversity. She placed a folded letter there, addressed to him. "Your laughter is my compass. I will carry it always." The final test came when the mine's entrance, now braced with steel reinforcements and digital locks, was opened under controlled conditions for a documentary crew. Riley watched from a safe distance as experts donned their gear and stepped into the darkness, their cameras capturing every flicker of dread. When they returned hours later, unharmed but shaken, Riley realized the mine's power had truly been contained. No more voices called out in midnight hours. No more regrets clawed at the edges of dreams. Black Hollow breathed easier. One crisp morning, Riley packed her car once more, ready to leave Black Hollow behind. In the back seat, a small box contained the recorded tapes, photos, and fragments of the runes, a testament to what they had endured. She took one last look at the town's main street, sunlight glinting off the refurbished windows and painted signs. Elijah waved from the library porch, Marina calling after her with a camera in hand. Riley allowed herself a small smile, free from the guilt that once chained her heart. As she merged onto the winding mountain road, the silhouette of the mine, her entrance, receded into memory. The sun climbed higher, scattering the morning mist like a loose prayer. Riley's thoughts drifted to Owen, his voice now a gentle echo rather than a harbinger of terror. She whispered his name, imagining him safe somewhere beyond the mine's reach, laughing as he once did. A calm assurance settled over her, a promise that no matter where she went, she carried her brother's memory within her, untainted by fear. In the rearview mirror, Black Hollow became a speck, its haunted past displaced by Riley's strength and closure. The endless sky stretched ahead, promising new horizons unmarked by shadows. And deep within her soul, she recognized that the truest horror had been the secrets she guarded, the fears she allowed to fester in the dark. By confronting them, she had banished the nightmare. Sometimes, she realized, the scariest thing isn't what's buried beneath, it's what we bury within ourselves.